My fingers were so tightly gripped on the phone that they hurt as I stood motionless on the veranda of our beachside house. As he spoke the words that broke Ryan and my dreams, my father's voice was tranquil, too tranquil. The beach house was sold, Emily. I swallowed hard. His words seemed to slip my mind. So I don't understand. He seemed to know just what he had done, since the other end of the line remained silent. Madison is once again in a predicament. This is a major matter. More than $200,000 is due from her. We were left with no other option. I was taken aback. Grasping the handrail was my only defense against falling. Those 7 years of hard work, late hours, and trust in each other turned that house into more than simply real estate. It was the realization of a dream. Our stories were embedded in every board and beam because we put our hearts into that location. Without informing us, he proceeded to give it away, without asking us first. I strained to speak, but my voice barely escaped a whisper. "Did you not forge our signatures?" His movements were slow and labored. Afterwards they uttered, "Our actions were justified. The house hardly sees any use from you. The life of Madison is in jeopardy. What could possibly be more crucial than that?" Anger, betrayal, and grief were crashing together, and I could feel the heat rising to my face. My voice quivered. "No one ever asked you. Even you failed to inform us. For her you pilfered from us. Once more." I received no response other than "We assumed you'd be able to comprehend." Families support one another. In the family. When I was younger, that word had more weight. It felt like a knife at that moment. I turned my gaze toward the sound of the waves lapping at the coast. These were the same waves that Ryan and I surfed when we initially determined that this house would serve as our legacy. Suddenly it vanished. It was all because my parents had toyed with danger once more in order to protect the one individual who had always escaped punishment. At that very second, I understood. This wasn't your average Madison mishap. The final straw was this. My parents' decision to prioritize Madison over me was not surprising to me. Yet again, they always had in their hearts. For my 5th birthday, my parents gave me a gleaming red tricycle. I distinctly recall letting out a squeal of delight as I encircled it with my little hands, firmly grasping the handlebars as if I had just found a source of boundless freedom. I wanted it so badly because it was the first present I can remember wanting. It had vanished 2 days after that. Madison snatched it. Despite her young age and continued wobbliness, my destiny was determined the second she proclaimed mine, gesturing toward the tricycle. "Emily, give it to her. Mom had told you you're the big sister in a forceful but not nasty way." "It was my birthday," I said in protest, and I recall my dad getting down on one knee by my side, running his fingers through my hair, whispering, "That's the job of older sisters. What you offer is generous. You keep people safe." For the first time, I felt completely unnoticed, certainly not the last. Upon my arrival at kindergarten, my grandmother sent me a pencil case adorned with unicorn glitter. The fact that it included little pockets for my crayons and a zippered closure made it perfect for me. Madison begged, sulked, and cried until Mom rescued it from me after I flaunted it for precisely 3 days. "My darling, she's still very young," Mom remarked. "I have an old one that you may use. Madison still has not mastered the concept of sharing." Still, I managed to do it. To make room for her, I knew I had to shrink gently and quietly, of course. When I was 9 years old, I stopped requesting extravagant gifts. I observed students enrolling in dancing programs, soccer teams, and piano lessons while I was at school. Just once, I inquired as to whether I could go swimming. From that moment on, I had an enduring affection for water. However, when Mom said she looked down at the sink the whole time, we had Madison signed up for piano and ballet classes before. Can we try again next year? There was no next year. Tutoring Madison was the sole extracurricular activity I participated in. While she fussed over a vocabulary test, I attempted to complete my arithmetic homework in the kitchen. After giving me a sidelong glance, my dad finally spoke. "Help is needed for Emily. Your job can be done at a later time." Eventually meant never. She was always the center of attention, whether it was a recital, a birthday, or a report card. The third-grade spelling bee is still fresh in my mind. For weeks, I honed my skills, secured the top spot. I was very excited to bring home a little trophy to show them when I got home. However, Madison had scraped her knee that very morning after tripping during break. My dad gave my prize a cursory glance that night. Everything he said was precisely that, "Be careful, she's had a bad day." In the end, I stashed the trophy beneath my bed. At the gym, when I ran a mile at a pace that record, Mom and Dad left the parent-teacher luncheon early because Madison wept. When my class was chosen to compete at the state science fair, they declined to come since they were unable to take time off work. However, they managed to squeeze in Madison's ballet performances, school plays, and art shows every single year. It was noticeable even around Christmas. One year, Madison received an iPad. Socks and notepads were my gifts. For Mom, they were practical. As a middle schooler, I stopped bragging about my accomplishments completely. So what's the point? My promotion to student council went unnoticed. I did nothing to celebrate my essay contest victory. I skipped out on giving the welcoming address at my school's open house, despite being selected to do so. At the same time, the residence became a crisis center if Madison received a B+ instead of an A. In contrast to you, Emily, she was perpetually sensitive, fragile, and not as tough. My high school experience taught me to keep out of people's way. I managed to get out of there by working part-time, saving money, and focusing. Vacate that residence, leaving that gloom behind. My path led to college. I applied for scholarships, filled out applications, and studied textbooks night after night, as if my life depended on it. I thought for a split second that maybe this time they would be proud when I finally got into my dream school, University of Washington. However, Mom hardly looked up from the stovetop as I informed them. "I like that. Madison was named to the honor roll, you know." The table was laden with Madison's favorite meals when I returned home that night for dinner. My accomplishments weren't being faded. It went unmentioned entirely. Going without food was my choice. Madison was the shining star in their eyes. It was my job to assist. Worse, I was exhausted. 4 years later, as I crossed the platform to accept my diploma, I had already forgotten about inviting them. In all likelihood, they were never going to show up. Listening to my dad's composed voice on the phone that day, as if he hadn't just committed fraud, was the most painful part, though. As if he hadn't previously disregarded all that Ryan and I had accomplished together. It seemed as if my existence was insignificant. However, I had grown out of my role as that unnoticed child. There was a shift in me. I had had enough of remaining silent. I didn't anticipate falling in love on the same day that I almost drowned. It began that way, though. I managed to get out of Oregon in the first week of my freshman year. I was still learning to breathe independently for the first time as I stood on the Santa Cruz coast. No one to talk to about it. Madison is not involved. It is only the water and I. Outside the student recreation facility, I noticed a flyer, windsurfing club. No experience needed, all welcome. I was captivated by it for some reason. Maybe it was because the sea was the only place nobody could drown me out, but I'd always had a thing for it. I wore borrowed wetsuit and worn-out sneakers that Saturday, totally unprepared but resolute. That day, the Pacific was a raging mess with ferocious winds and merciless waves. I tripped and fell repeatedly. My eyes, throat, and pride were all burnt by the salt water. Someone eventually shouted from the shore after I must have flipped the board a dozen times. I can feel you struggling against the current. Squinting in the sun, I peered up and caught sight of him. Mr. Cooper Ryan, captain of the club, senior, appears to have been sculpted from a combination of surfboard wax and sea air. His smile, not his physique, was what first caught my eye. I didn't feel like he was trolling me. He was unfazed. He took his time. While jogging into the waves, he extended his hand and stated, "Everyone wipes out at first." I was completely embarrassed for a while. "You are excelling." I had no idea how much I needed to hear those words until now. The man lifted me up, assisted me in learning to change my weight, an approach to wind reading, what to do if I feel a loss of control, how to remain calm. I gradually improved over the course of the next weeks, more powerful, less constrained. Still we advanced. Standing in the still center of a tempest, Ryan exuded an air of tranquility. His attention was captivated. He then waited for me to tell him my life goals. We talked about hopes, failures, and family throughout our many late-night meals and afternoons spent on the water. I was first noticed by him as the sister of Madison No, without playing the role of the nice girl. Emily is all. We were inseparable a few months down the road. I learned to drive a stick from him. He learned budgeting from me while working 2 part-time jobs and praying. With ramen noodles and laughing, we created our own little world. An offer for a position in corporate marketing came my way after I finished college. No risk, very sturdy, not unexpected. However, Ryan possessed an alternative notion. Initiate something on our own, should we? That made me giggle. To what extent we have no money, I said, so we get creative. We spent weeks at the crack of dawn brainstorming on napkins, constructing a firm from the ground up, an import distributor of eco-friendly, high-quality water sports gear that Ryan had tested during competitions. I thought it was crazy. Neither of us had a bachelor's degree in business, and our combined savings barely covered rent. We were both in our 20s. However, we had faith in it and were ravenous. It was Ryan's uncle who loaned him $5,000. In addition to my night shift as a college janitor, I worked 2 additional shifts at the cafe. We subsisted on unprocessed rice, unsweetened coffee, and unwavering faith. We started out in a tiny flat above a laundry. With each spin cycle of the dryers, the structure trembled. 2 cinder block desks and a door we rescued from the curb served as our combined workspace. This is the starting line, Ryan declared that first night as he opened a bottle of sparkling wine which cost him $4. Why don't we make it count? Nobody would accept us. You're not old enough. Nobody knows who you are. Return once you have actual figures. We persisted, though, appearing at tournaments, trade exhibitions, ports, and anywhere else we could find an audience. We had conversations with sportsmen, wholesalers, and mom-and-pop stores. Our own blood, sweat, and tails went into creating our brand. The break followed. A modest family-run Australian firm was seeking to break into the American market when we met them at a Florida coastal sports exhibition. Like us, they were honest and feisty. Our connection was instantaneous. They experimented with us. A deal with a sole distributor on the West Coast. We were taken aback. Back in our cramped flat that night, we slept through the whole thing. To music we clapped, we sobbed. Our dreams were more audible than ever before. After then, progress was made, rather slowly. Of course not. Every single penny was reinvested. We widened our range of products. Amanda, who came in with a resume on neon pink paper, became our operations manager after being hired as our first part-time assistant. The apartment was too small for us after only 3 years. Transferred to an actual warehouse, featured in a specialized sports publication. Local beach tournaments featured our logo. We were unrecognized in the business realm, but here in our little nook, we were doing something meaningful. After that, we took a random drive south of Monterey, down the coast one day. A house was visible to us. Age had taken its toll on it. Old and worn, perched on a bluff, partially concealed by untamed flora and weathered trees. We were sure as soon as our eyes fell upon the beauty of the water below. Under his breath, Ryan muttered, his fingers interlaced with mine. "This is the one." I was under no obligation to respond. This is how I felt too. We filled it to the brim. Each additional dollar, each and every weekend. The floors were hand-sanded, finished painting the front porch. Solar panels were set up, differed over tile options, and labored through plumbing tutorials on YouTube. But our fingerprints were all over that place, our conflicts. We were laughing, the peaceful mornings and late-night ideas sessions we share. Every aspect of it belonged to us. We shared a blanket and 2 beers as we rested on the back porch one night after sanding cabinets all day. In the sky, the stars flickered. Far below, the water murmured a sound. I looked across to Ryan and he said, "Let us age in this place." I had faith that we would. To us, that house was more than a home. We had evidence. You proved that a perfect family and a safety net weren't necessary. To succeed, all you needed was the correct person and the will to keep going. Yet aspirations are delicate entities. The folks you left behind will be unable to bear to see you soar without them. At the crack of dawn, my phone rang as the light peeked over the Monterey shore. My most recent travel was a 10-day business trip across Southeast Asia, during which I had countless client meetings, endured lengthy flights, and slept through many hotel rooms. After a long flight, I was ready for a relaxing weekend at the house that Ryan and I had constructed from the ground up. While the coffee was brewing in the kitchen, I was still in my jammies when I noticed the caller ID. Dear Father, I trembled. I should have known something was wrong just from that. Except when it was concerning Madison, he hardly contacted me by phone. I responded, "Hello, Dad. Is everything all right?" The pause was excessively long. His voice then emerged, strained, yet attempting an air of casualness. "Hey, Emily, I think we should have a chat." I sensed it. A problem existed. "What's happening?" His throat was cleared as if he were going to read from a script. "I'm referring to the beach house." My heart sank. Thoughts on that? Here we go again. I was completely taken aback by the following sentence. "We have already made a sale. The transfer of ownership will take place next month." Because I didn't get it, I blinked. Is it sold? I don't understand what you're saying. Silently I spoke. Do not claim it as your own. So do Ryan and I. Not at all. Madison's having another round of problems, he cut in. Now is the moment for seriousness. A terrible financial ensnared ensnared her. She has more than $200,000 in debt. Debt collectors will if we do nothing to assist. My body slammed against a chair. For an instant, I couldn't see clearly. Has our home been sold? Listen, Emily. Without informing us how unaskable even, my voice went from trembling to furious. In order to hold the phone steady, I had to switch it to speaker mode because my hands were trembling so terribly. We had to move swiftly, he lamented. Plus, we had your signature from the beginning papers already in our records. We just reused the documents, they said. Yes, I saw it. The very thing that made me cringe when I heard the term sold. Our signatures were forgeries. I clenched my jaw. Feeling helpless, the wrath surged upstream. That's against the law, I declared with determination. That's called deceit. On the other end of the line, there was a nervous breath. We had no intention of causing harm. Basically, Madison is in need of assistance. You no longer even remain there very often. Emily, she is your sister. Her life is more valuable than any building in your opinion. That house isn't just a house, I retorted severely. Everything that Ryan and I created is here. That's what we want. We own it. For her, you even stole it. Once more. My own heartbeat was audible to me. Just outside the window, we could hear the waves smashing. These were the waves that rocked us to sleep, carried our joy, and preserved our memories. Who was going to own that now? Some random person. Due to the fact that Madison made an error, yet again, because my parents would always be there to provide her with matches, no matter how many times she set everything on fire. You falsified official documents, I said again. Your rationale is irrelevant to me. I'm contacting the authorities. The sound of gulp escaped him. Please, Emily, don't act so foolish. This concerns someone's family. No, I said with an air of detached seriousness. Damn, this is illegal. The call was abruptly ended. For a split second, the only sounds were those of the wind outside and the cracking of my own breathing. I choose not to weep. At this time, no. Repressing tears was too much anger. A lawyer and the police were contacted by me within the hour. The original documents, including the one that Ryan and I had put away with our signatures, which were different from the ones used in the phony sale agreement, were photographed and given to them. Upon leaving the office that day, Ryan arrived home immediately. He had a pallid face and clenched his jaw. I had conversations with the purchasers, he declared. I found out that one of them was actually a classmate of mine from college. Everything was relayed to him. A combination of your father's story and the seeming haste of the sale caused them to have second thoughts, he said. Wow, they totally bailed. Almost passing out, I let out a sigh of relief. It's far from over, he said. The police have taken action. Your parents' acts are being investigated. We skipped dinner that night. Sitting on the balcony in quiet contemplation, we clasped hands and gazed out at the water as if it held the key to our problems. However, it provided no benefits beyond a reduction in noise. The inquiry progressed rapidly. Notary stamp forgeries, bank transfers, and faked signatures were discovered by the authorities within days. My mother had allegedly told our neighbors that Ryan and I were planning to move abroad and needed to sell our house fast, but that was just a lie. They're in trouble. our attorney said, his voice accentuating anxiety. I didn't act impulsively. All of this was set up, with great care. I chose not to answer. That is just not possible for me. Reason being, my folks weren't merely attempting a house invasion. They had disregarded my independence, my career, and my relationship with Ryan, all of which I believed they still valued. They were prepared to ruin everything, in Madison's case, and that didn't even shock her. At last she summoned him, but it was to yell. What gives you the ability to accomplish this? She let out a frustrated cry. Our parents should be called to the police. I find that repulsive. You lack heart. My response was nonverbal. I merely whispered their goal was to take our house. That's illegal. But Emily, it's me. Over here, I'm going to die. Assist me, please. After saying, then get a swimming lesson, I ended the call. The subsequent days were really difficult. I learned that Madison had accrued debt in the past more than we were aware of. She spent a student loan on high-end handbags. Weekends in Sin City drained her tuition budget. An ex-boyfriend who persuaded her to invest unneeded funds in cryptocurrency. My parents intervened every time. Got it paid off. She was pampered. I warned her that life was tough and that she was too soft for it. All the time they urged me to keep my strength, to settle, in order to tend to her needs while they were away. At this point, they had almost ruined everything that Ryan and I had constructed, and that was all. When Mom called, she was crying, but I didn't respond. Dad sent me lengthy emails pleading with me to think again, but I ignored them. I ignored the "we're sorry" scrawled on the envelope that they sent me. I reported everything to the authorities. Simply put, love does not include turning a blind eye. Loving someone does not entail a submitting to others' dominance for the sake of family. It is not love. We call that giving up. Additionally, I had stopped bleeding. Never mind the treachery. That was the easy part. The worst part was seeing that nobody else shared your view that it was wrong. My parents were reported a week later, and my phone turned into a battlefield. A flurry of calls from long-lost relatives trying to persuade me to drop the charges with their worried voices. And fake pity started ringing my phone. They are your parents, Emily. All they wanted to do was assist your sister. You're being dramatic. Is suing your family truly in your future? Like a curse, the identical line kept coming up. You've been around longer. You ought to comprehend. I thought that was the crux of the matter. Everyone had been telling me to understand my whole life, to sacrifice, to take charge, to maintain silence. But nobody ever made an effort to get Madison to grasp the concept. Her apologies went unnoticed. Even feigning remorse was out of her. She instead messaged me on Instagram of all places 3 days after the police officially launched an investigation. A brief statement. May you be filled with joy. You wrecked it all. It went unanswered, yet I perused it countless times. To this day, she still doesn't know what she ruined. Reason being, she had never constructed anything before. Life seemed to owe Madison something as she floated through it. While I juggled 3 jobs, went to night classes, and pieced together a future from shreds. And her parents were always there to help her land gently after each crash. Paying up her credit cards had emptied their retirement fund. Grandpa sold us the remaining plot of land so we could pay off her failed Etsy shop. Plus, they attempted to steal from me just now. I vividly recall standing in the warehouse office hallway, holding the phone and panting heavily while the police investigator filled me in on the details. Your signature and Ryan's were both forgeries. The structure was perfect. They lied to the real estate agent and said you two were moving overseas. Months of planning went into this. I felt a parched sensation in my mouth. Many months, even though I was busy giving talks at environmental sustainability panels and organizing product displays in Bali. My parents were hatching a conspiracy to have me erased from my life. Even worse, they failed to perceive it in that light. Something else was tacked on by the detective. My mom had sobbed while we were interrogated, not because of her actions, but because she was self-conscious about how they would look to other people. They were forced into it, she claimed. Madison is never helped by Emily. She's never warm. Suddenly, she's different. It was her correct assessment. There was a shift in me when I realized that love meant letting yourself be harmed repeatedly. I no longer believed it. Silence was strength, but I no longer believed that. Additionally, I ceased acting as though being a family member granted me special privileges. Still, that didn't simplify matters in the least. I saw her one night while grocery shopping after a long day at work. The woman I call Mom, in the frozen food section of a budget grocery store. It took a while for her to notice me. She appeared leaner than I recalled, with her posture slouched. A jumble of dents in the can's spoiled bread and peeling clearance labels made up her basket. Her face changed from shocked to ashamed as soon as our gazes connected. Afterwards, she averted her gaze, quickly, without making a sound, as if I were the one responsible for all the wrongdoing. None of us pursued her. Paralyzed and with my heart pounding in my throat, I stood there under the buzzing fluorescent lights. Feeling vindicated was important to me, but I was just exhausted. A short time after Madison emailed me, just a simple subject line, "I beg you." She jotted down, "I am aware that I have erred. On the other hand, I could use some assistance. Over here, I'm going to die. The only way I can convince you that I can fix this is if you lend me $50,000. This time I have a unique opportunity." "Very well, Emily. Other than you, I am alone. I am not apologizing. Nobody owns it. One more thing I need." Once again, she wanted me to extinguish a fire. My inbox was closed, grasped the moment. Also provided her with a directory of nonprofit organizations that offered debt counseling, financial education, and rehabilitation services. What followed was my blocking of her. That night, as my fingers grew numb from staring out at the sea, Ryan discovered me on the deck. His initial silence was deafening. Seated next to me, he casually draped a blanket over my shoulders. And lastly, in a low voice, "You are no longer burdened with the weight of their decisions." I finally believed him after a long period of doubt. 3 weeks subsequently, word got out about the police case. Retired couple under investigation for forgery fraud in property scheme involving daughter. The story was picked up by a local news station. I felt sick to my stomach reading the news. This is not because they were wrong, but rather because everything seemed so out of place. My family wasn't the only ones anymore. It was quite the show. Some distant cousins texted me nasty messages. A single individual even penned, "Why didn't you simply let it go?" How much is one house? Just one residential unit. That residence was every 3 in the morning. In the kitchen, where Ryan and I laid out our company strategies. Laughter over pancakes that were too brown was a Christmas morning tradition. This is the spot where I sobbed after Ryan constructed a fort for me out of beach towels when my first overseas shipment was canceled. We had proof in that house. It had been accomplished. The The people they promised we would be weren't us, and they attempted to delete it as if it were meaningless. Yeah, I just couldn't let it go. A full 6 months later, my folks got their sentences. No further punishment will be imposed, not incarcerated. A stain on our family history and an indelible note on their records. The apologies they sent after sentencing were never read by me. Without even opening one, I trashed them. Forgiveness doesn't always bring healing. Repeat offenders may find it a loophole at times. Additionally, I had had enough of guiding them through it. The aftermath was subtle yet severe. Someone bought their house. As a parking lot security guard, my dad worked the night shift. In addition to working as a cashier during the day and packing at a warehouse in the morning, my mom also worked as a 24-hour diner at night, all for minimal wage. People in the neighborhood conversed. She looks incredibly slimmer now. I heard they're down in a little apartment close to Salinas now. Madison remained unaltered. A former acquaintance of hers claims that she began seeing a man from the nightclub scene, boasting to everyone that she had found another investment opportunity that would surely be successful. She remained unchanged. On the other hand, my parents had no idea either. They continued to return her calls. They persisted in trying to save up what little money they had, continuing to employ the same old explanation for her carelessness. Emily is stronger than her. She needs us, we replied. She never matured because of them, and I don't think they ever understood it. Their term for it was love. However, it was toxic, devastatingly slow and sweet. Both Ryan and I stood back and observed. In the evenings, I would occasionally get silent, gazing out the window and trying to make sense of everything that has happened. You could feel it, Ryan. Sitting down with a glass of wine in hand, he would silently pour me a glass and then simply be there. They were no longer a frequent topic of conversation. For the simple reason that I hadn't just lost faith, I had lost something more profound. The concept that Fessies represented protection. For parents, it was all about safety. A house was defined by family. That story had grown on me. Further, the pain was excruciating. I was also set free by it. You may start living your life to the fullest once you quit wishing for other people to change into their ideal selves and start being that person yourself. Not much of a thud accompanied the last straw. Included in an email that I nearly ignored, it consisted of just one brief sentence. I need $50,000, Margaret. I assure you I can reverse this situation. She remained silent. The question of my well-being was never addressed. No regrets. I am not apologizing. Another frantic plea from a sister who insisted everyone should bail her out. Unfortunately, the world had vanished by this point. Madison had drained my parents of their life savings, retirement, health, and reputation, leaving me with almost little that belonged to me. After this, she reasoned the cycle could go on forever. I would serve as the subsequent safety net. But being the net was enough for me. As I sat alone at my desk in the office that Ryan and I had constructed from the ground up, I stared at that message for what seemed like an eternity. As light streamed in through the window, shadows danced across the wooden floor where we had taken our seats. The room served as a constant reminder of the person I had become, not as a result of or even in response to them, but because of them. As for Madison, she hadn't altered one bit. She was still hopping from one man to another, job to job, and narrative to story, according to one of Ryan's town pals. That one from recently. Her investment in a series of transient speakeasies. spread out across the Southwest, was persuaded by a nightclub promoter named Vince. Naturally, she believed him. She had the same faith in the crypto guy, a multi-level marketing company on skincare, the influencer mentoring system, the 3-week-old vacation blog agency that declared bankruptcy. Whenever things went wrong, my parents would rush over to save her, regardless of the outcome. And that's after the cases concluded. A neighbor told me that my father, who is about 70 years old, worked non-stop security night shifts. Mom, who was still dragging herself like a ghost from the warehouse to the diner, was juggling her triple job routine. They were really worn out, yet he is still holding on to Madison. Her defense continues. She's making an effort, Mom informed a relative while they were out grocery shopping. All she needs is a break. That has never been stated about me. I was simply assumed to be all right. How was business? They didn't even bother to call, forgot to check if I was getting any rest. I didn't stop to consider whether the case had cost me anything other than time and money. For more than 10 years, I saw my parents bury themselves in Madison's rubble, trying to salvage what little of her life she had never attempted to mend. But now, the fragments were slicing into them, causing them to bleed. Despite this, they persisted. I could have intervened. Everyone desired that. People from the family contacted, have sent a message. Like specters from long-forgotten family barbecues, they appeared in my inbox. Emily, they're in pain. You control the resources. Can you please lend them a hand for once? Only once. Before this, I had given them far more than was fair to them. They disregarded me, so I let them be quiet. When they chose favoritism, I respected their decision. Despite my inner turmoil, I showed them unwavering patience for a long time. At least this time I set limits for them. I only sent one message in response to Madison's email. No, you should consult an expert if you need assistance. Here are a few that I have included. After that, I made a list of places that help people with mental health issues and financial literacy. Next, I sent the message. What followed was my blocking of her. Anger, not pride, was the source of the pain in my chest, and not merely because of what I had lost. The part of me, nevertheless, that clung to the hope that things could turn out differently. Between the courthouse and my last encounter with my mother in that grocery aisle, she had passed away. My aunt, who is Dad's older sister, left a voicemail for me a few days after that. Despite my letting it go to spam, I saw the transcription. Although he was working, he passed out. Working too hard. He's doing fine, but it's a crisis. Are you indifferent? For what felt like hours, I sat there, phone face down on the table, stewing over that message. It was important to me. The weight of responsibility for other people's decisions became too much for me to bear. The next night, Ryan discovered me trembling uncontrollably while I brewed tea in the kitchen. His inquiries were non-existent. He merely embraced me and murmured, "No matter what you choose, I will support you." I knew at that very second, no way could I return. Some time elapsed. The messages ceased, withered the calls. Everything else shifted. Still, it wasn't a quiet one. It felt weighty. After a funeral, there was a profound stillness. Not for a specific individual, but for the bond I had fought so hard to maintain for so long. I questioned whether I should feel bad about it on occasion. If my decision to walk away was seen as emotionless. However, guilt is complex. It can evoke feelings of love if you've internalized the belief that your role in the plot is to endure suffering. I wasn't cold-hearted, I felt better, and letting go was a part of healing. Restraint from further deceit. Less manipulation, please. No way would I want to be the emotional garbage can for a family that was only ever there when they needed them. Ryan and I finally returned to the beach cottage that winter after being away for months. The air was so crisp and dry that your breath could be seen through the cloud cover. We started a fire. Cocoa was made, play some vinyl records. I inhaled deeply for the first time in what seemed like an eternity. No matter how disorganized everything else got, the ocean was always there, and we stood on the back porch marveling at it. "Are you all right?" Ryan inquired. A nod came from me. "Now I'm feeling better than I have in a while." He extended a hand toward mine. "We constructed this, you know. Certainly not those people. In no other case. Us. And nobody will ever be able to take it away from us." In this, he was correct. The outside world might catch fire from that house. However, I felt secure on this cliff, in the solitude of the salty air. The realization that family isn't something you're born into came after you'd already lost everything. It's up to you. I opted for tranquility. Truth I chose. I opted for myself. Neither my parents nor Madison's future seemed clear to me. However, I was aware of this too. I would no longer participate in the loop. It wasn't that I didn't care about them. Nonetheless, it was because I came to appreciate myself more. That was a possible ending to the narrative. Come here quietly. Final. However, suffering may reverberate, particularly when eyes are fixed on you. Unexpectedly, the first fresh turn of events occurred. Early one morning, Ryan swarmed into my office, phone in hand. His cheeks were red and his brows were wrinkled. "Do you have a look at this, Emily?" The phone was playing a TikTok video when I removed it from his hand. A woman whose face I couldn't place was staring into the camera with a look that straddled sympathy and contempt. She evidently went to the police on her own parents who are in their golden years. For a house. Whatever they did, that appears cold-hearted to me, folks. Gesturing, I blinked. A jumble of presumptions and nebulous ethics filled the comment area. "Wow, do you feel entitled? Honestly, I doubt that house belonged to her. Ancient relatives, such treachery is unbecoming of you." The number of views was in the thousands. Countless individuals. More videos of individuals responding, stitching, and speculating started appearing online. What was once a personal narrative had transformed into something everyone could see online. They were all quick to pass judgment, despite being unfamiliar with my name. As I perused the remarks, it was as if I were reading an untrue version of my life, penned by complete strangers. Anxiety gripped me. "This isn't real," I said. "I'm unknown to them." However, that was irrelevant. Facts were not waited for by social media. The dramatic tension was its bread and butter. A local reporter eventually reached out to me for an interview after hearing the outcry online. At first, I paid it no mind. I preferred it if it vanished. However, remaining silent had not helped me in the past and would not now. I decided to write about it. Without getting defensive or furious, I went down at my laptop and wrote a letter expressing my honest thoughts and feelings. Truthfully, I must say, it was uploaded to our company website by myself. After that, we included it in our social media posts. My parents are the reason I didn't report them to the authorities. I despise them. They used my forged signature to sell the house my love, and I had built, so I had no choice but to do it. Even when the threat originates from those who brought you up, it is sometimes necessary to defend your peace in order to safeguard your property, reputation, and dignity. Perhaps we have all been taught that being silent is a form of love if we feel that speaking up makes us uncaring. These days, though, I'm wiser. Plus, I have no qualms about drawing a line. What happened next, extremely heavy. Numerous messages arrived. Everyone from acquaintances to complete strangers. Those whose loved ones had taken advantage of them, twisted them, and silenced them all in the name of love. Authors reported that women felt heard. Many men confessed to crying. A girl said, "Listening to your story empowered me to finally reject my mom's requests." It dawned on me for the first time that this wasn't an isolated incident. Ours it was, for those of us who had been instructed to remain silent in order to maintain stability, keeping our composure even when we were in pain. Some part of me changed the instant it happened. I had come out of hiding. The second twist, though, was Ryan's idea. The month of March had nearly completed. Along the coast, the first indications of spring were appearing, and the air was just beginning to warm. After finishing a meeting, he returned home, dropped his keys in the bowl beside the entrance, and uttered, "Thoughts have been brewing." I raised my eyes from my computer. Oh no, his laughter filled the air. What if the doors were left open? To what end is this another legal dispute? No, he informed her. Towards a positive end, a force greater than ourselves. His voice was gentle yet assured as he sat down next to me. Maybe this site can carry even more than the memories we've always said it did. Imagine if we made it into a spot where youngsters like us could hang out. Those who were disregarded, the people who were never given an opportunity, a voice, or any kind of recognition. My heart hurt in the finest possible way as I gazed at him. Such as a getaway, he compared it to a sanctuary, and we show them how to surf. They learn to put their faith in the waves. By believing in them, we demonstrate what is possible for them. Something in me was sparked by the concept. A fresh form of meaning. Several neighborhood nonprofits were contacted. I created a simple program, created a summer program pilot that brought together 12 underprivileged youth for an unforgettable, week-long adventure. I was out on the porch seeing the arrival of the first group. As the vans pulled in, I witnessed anxious stares and uncertain steps as people ventured onto uncharted territory. Also, I was that girl I recalled, feeling terrorized, come here quietly, completely undetectable, until somebody took hold of my hand and uttered, "This is your place." There was laughter that resounded into the nightboards under arms, and a delightful sense of disorder that week. Jaguari stood out among the girls. She was really silent for the first 2 days. However, I discovered her lounging alone on the deck, gazing at the water on the 3rd morning. "So you wind up surfing?" I posed the question. She objected by shaking her head, scared to death. My face lit up with joy. "Same here. I was afraid I was going to drown the first time." Bidding, she looked away. "Is it you?" "I see." Someone nevertheless thought I was up to the task. Indeed, I did. The first time she got up on her board was that afternoon. Very unstable. I was amazed, glorious. I cried, because this was the physical manifestation of healing. Judgment days are over. Amidst the din, when we eventually grant ourselves a second opportunity, we are in a better position to provide others one. We named the show Wave Back. I really wish someone had informed me about this a long time ago. You are free to choose how you will spend the rest of your life. Feel free to hop on, deal with it. Feel free to wave back. The seaside house we had always dreamed of became a reality that summer. For some, it became a wish as well. Also, this is a first. It was as if everything had its proper place. Before dragging you down the waves, don't bother to inquire about your identity. Whether you were the most beloved or the most neglected kid, it makes no difference to them. No matter how you were raised, loved, ignored, complimented, or ignored, it makes no difference to them. Just be yourself. They won't judge you if you're raw, trembling, and attempting to stand. Also, they put you through your paces. I learned that from the water. To remain stable rather than courageous. Not to prevent the fall, but to rise again after the disaster. That, in many respects, is the central theme of this narrative. I used to believe that in order to survive, you had to go smaller, having virtue, maintaining silence, under the radar. I naively believed that I could achieve the same level of love that Madison received simply by being myself. If I provided enough, if I maintained a modest enough presence. However, that type of love, it never happened. It came with stipulations, very delicate. Unless I give my life for it. I did something I had never done before when it came time to defend Ryan, our company, our house, and our tranquility. I picked myself. Everything I always valued about family has been stripped away by that choice. One more thing, though, came out of that. Freedom. Certainly not the kind you'd find in a self-help manual. Those that inflict wounds. That kind that jolts you awake at 3 a.m. The type that makes you stronger than you thought you could be. I met youngsters who were very similar to me during the last year as our program Waveback expanded. Come here quietly. Take care. Carrying more weight than their age should allow. As he dried off his board one afternoon, a 12-year-old child named Malik, charismatic, perceptive, and remarkably silent all week, asked me, "Have you maintained contact with your parents?" I halted. Then I responded truthfully, "No, and I'm not sure I'll ever do it again." He averted his gaze for a brief second. Next they murmured, "I also avoid communicating with mine." My heart pounded as I nodded. "That doesn't imply you're mentally unstable," I reassured him. It all boils down to the opportunity to create something fresh. I have to experience that reality myself in order to comprehend it. No one is entitled to your tranquility, not even your loved ones, particularly not your loved ones if they compromise your tranquility for their own convenience. Many consider forgiveness to be the highest form of virtue. On occasion, though, forgiving someone is really just helping them to look better. Forgiveness isn't always the answer. Now it's time for release. To release in order to cease extending a helping hand. To keep moving forward even when no one else does because you have faith that you are allowed to. That was always a mystery to my folks, regardless of the outcome, even when they had lost all they owned. Love in their minds still meant dominion. They held out hope that Madison could turn things around with their support just one more. Support without responsibility isn't love, though. Call it sabotage. I am also committed to ending my self-sabotage streak. The house they attempted to take is still our home, and Ryan and I are still here. But these days, it's not only about the walls and windows. It's in a school, starting point. An oasis for individuals who were never fortunate enough to have visited one. From foster care to shelters, to youngsters who have gone missing in ways no one has ever suspected, we take in children every season. They learn to ride the waves instead of being scared of them. The ability to fall vomit and be swallowed and then get back up again. I always feel better when I witness one of them regain their footing, because I did the same thing, in life, not on a surfboard. It had its flaws. Oh no, I dropped the ball. It was my own doubts that I voiced. The pangs of shame nearly killed me. However, I managed to avoid drowning instead. Therefore, it is significant. I sometimes like quiet time on the back porch, sipping coffee, and gazing out at the distant horizon. No, it's not because I'm anticipating anything. Rather, I have all the things I need right here. In tranquility, among the stillness, in the room I finished constructing for my own use. Finally, if there's one thing I could tell everyone listening, the lady staying up late in her dorm, the guy recovering from a mother who never apologized, and the little girl who can't stop thinking about how much they're enough. Here it is. It is acceptable for you to decline. Feel free to sketch a line if you like. Standing alone in the dark for a moment is okay if it means protecting your light. For the reason that healing, it's not too noisy. This isn't a film. There are other methods to tie things up. Yet it is genuine. As soon as you give up on helping those who refuse to change, it all starts to fall apart. Instead, you should begin to reconstruct yourself. So I find myself in this position, incomplete in the sense that fairy tales claim, but truthfully. Plus, it's absolutely free, at long last wholly for me.